So, Letterboxd recently put out their annual year in review for 2025, and among the many categories there was Most Divisive, which Letterboxd defines as the movies with most even distribution between 5 stars and half a star. So you know they're interesting. Not really. I still don't know what some of these are, but this doesn't strike me as a particularly artsy selection. I mean, number 1 is the third sequel to a Disney Channel movie. But which side is right, 5 stars or half a star? It's time to talk about the only side that matters, mine. I'm watching as many of these as I can, meaning all of them that are available for free or on some service that I have. I've done this before a couple years ago. I skipped last year probably because it was a lot of work for something that didn't even get much more attention than my usual mediocre videos. But maybe this one will be different since I actually started putting the effort into making thumbnails since then. I held a poll on social media and the few people who voted on it preferred this, so here we are. Bigger than ever. The first one had 4 movies and one that I've already talked about. For this one, there will be 7 movies that are available for me, including one that I've already seen and one that I've already made a video about. I'm just not gonna watch those 2 again. I know what I think about them. I don't get paid enough to be this thorough. So I only saw 5 movies for this video. Only 1 more than I saw for last video. And 2 more movies in total than last time. So big you can hardly believe it. Anyway, let's get into number 10, Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, available on Peacock. The continuation of, oh dear, the Twisted Childhood Universe, or the Pooh-niverse. The first one to not be about Winnie the Pooh. Usually Peacock runs all their ads before the movie starts, leaving no interruptions for the entire runtime, but for this one they put in regular commercial breaks throughout as if to punish me for even thinking about watching this movie. Now, I've talked about the first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey on this channel before. I'll put a link to it in the description, but basically here's what I said about it.
It stinks!
I haven't seen the second one, but I've heard it's better. And if it's on the level of this movie, that's a big improvement. Congratulations, with this one you finally managed to make something mediocre, maybe even bordering on good. It's from director Scott Chambers, who played Christopher Robin in the Blood and Honey sequel, but not the original. Thank goodness they got rid of that actor.
Why are you doing this? We used to be friends. What? Stop!
Chambers also directed a lot of movies with titles like Fire-nado, Kingdom of the Dinosaurs, Exorcist Vengeance, The Mutation, Cannibal Troll, Hellcat, spelt with a K, Clown Doll, The Bad Nun, and The Curse of Humpty Dumpty. We're in the presence of high art here. Also, Jan Barry is credited as the writer, of course. This one is a lot more grounded than Blood and Honey. From skimming the Wikipedia page, I found out that it was originally supposed to be about an evil version of Peter Pan who was as magical as the original, but Blood and Honey 2 went over budget, so they rewrote this to have less fantasy elements. In this one, Peter's just a normal serial child killer, who's an adult by the way, who believes he's sending his victims to Neverland. And Tinkerbell is a transgender drug addict with Stockholm Syndrome. I'm going to take the high road and presume that the fact that the so-called fairy is a trans woman is just an unfortunate coincidence. Actually, the director is apparently a member of the LGBT community who defied studio orders by subtly hinting toward a character being gay, so yeah, almost definitely a coincidence. The movie opens years ago with Peter working at a circus and trying to abduct a child in his own house by peeking through the basement hatch in full clown makeup and trying to convince him to come with him in an extremely blatant ripoff of it.
Peekaboo.
How did you get down there?
I'm Peter. It's nice to meet you.
But don't worry, it's mostly just for that one scene. Yeah, it spends the rest of the movie ripping off the black phone instead. Years later, he kidnaps Michael, one of the siblings in the original who nobody remembers the name of because he isn't Wendy, and he holds him in his basement, and occasionally wears masks for no reason. And his sister Wendy needs to look for him, along with her friend Tiger Lily. This more grounded method would kind of work for an original movie, like if it was just a film about a child killer that heavily references Peter Pan. Actually, it would probably be taken more seriously if it was that. And honestly, even now, this is actually a great way to do a dark retelling of the tale. Possibly more interesting than whatever they were going to do with Peter actually taking kids to Neverland. And of course, easier to do on a rubber mask for Winnie the Pooh budget. But it's a little underwhelming as an addition to a cinematic universe where actual magic exists. That's obviously not as important, but it is a little disappointing. I've complained that Blood and Honey didn't subvert as much as it should have, but at least it was about Winnie the Pooh actually existing and doing evil things. This one works better in terms of subverting the original story, but also feels less like it's sticking it to Disney. Apparently the potential sequel will confirm that Neverland is an actual place. That would probably be stupid if the original movie existed in a vacuum, but as part of this universe, it would actually probably make it fit in better. Right now it feels like if somebody decided that Goodfellas existed in the same universe as Ghostbusters. I mean, you can't prove it wrong, I guess. Actually, maybe you can for this, because in one scene, one of the child characters is wearing a shirt with the Blood and Honey poster on it. Okay, that should be considered child abuse. But whatever, as a movie, it is surprisingly not terrible. Yes, it is derivative of other, better recent movies, but it is at least decently made. Peter Pan is played by Martin Portlock, who is actually a better actor than you'd expect. Ignore that bad Pennywise imitation I showed you. He doesn't do that throughout. He draws on a lot of things in his performance, but it actually does come across as disturbing and gives the character more life than this universe deserves. There is also a bit more of an actual story here, and you can see improvement in a lot of things like acting and, especially, the gore effects. While Blood and Honey looked cheap, the violence here looks brutal. This movie was not rated here in America, but this time there are actually parts that feel like it could be unrated. The final act feels as sick and twisted as any Terrifying movie, and Portlock might not be as terrifying as David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, but he is scary enough to add to all the horror. This movie is a surprise with how decent it is, but I can't really make this a fully positive review simply because of how much it borrows from other movies. But it does kind of make me slightly more interested in this universe. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't pay for any of these movies, but I'm convinced that it could at least be slightly interesting to follow in the way that all horror franchises that go on for too long are. At this rate, they'll be making masterpieces within a few years. Gotta at least watch Blood and Honey too. What does the good version of Blood and Honey look like? Anyway, this movie is surprisingly watchable despite its B-movie background. Number 9 is Fixed. I've already seen this one months before, so this is from memory. The long gestating passion project of Genndy Tartakovsky. For those of you who don't know, he is one of the greatest living voices in Western animation. Creator of Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, Star Wars Clone Wars, Primal, the list goes on. This was an idea that he's had since 2009, and it finally got made, defying all safe bets for animated film by being hand-drawn and with a hard R rating. It was glorious, until Warner Bros. Decided to completely scrap it to save money. But never to fear, for they only distributed it, and it was instead made by Sony Entertainment, which is run by people who actually have souls, and they were able to shop it around until finally it was sold to Netflix, and is now being presented in all of its glory. So what is this triumph of artistic expression in the face of corporate greed made by the master himself? A movie about dog balls.
Yeah, that's my dick.
Yeah, this may be the only one on the list where everybody involved probably went into the production believing that they would make something divisive, best case scenario. Something this lowbrow and transgressive would almost surely divide people. Finally, something divisive in a cool and artistic way. And I don't think it's very good. Yeah, it really sucks for me to say that, considering all that it's been through, and the backlash to it for its shock humor has been pretty toxic. From what I've seen, everybody started to realize that when the animators started to get death threats. Once again, this is because they animated some dick jokes that they didn't even write. Gen Z purism has officially reached satanic panic levels. Can't wait until I start accusing Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion of being the literal devil. But no, I get it, animation is cinema and should be about more than just shock value, so therefore it should never do shock humor under any circumstances. You know animation is for adults when its fans say that it's not allowed to be as R-rated as live action. Just saying, Dix the Musical is worse than this, but nobody seems to care. But anyway, let's get into this movie I'm defending. It sucks. Directed by Tartakovsky, who also wrote it along with John Vitti, who worked on The Larry Sanders Show, The Simpsons, and The Angry Birds movie. With a story that they made with Steve Greenberg, writer for the original Chips and Fall Guy shows, and Rich Lufrano, who only has this on his IMDb. It's about a dog played by Adam Devine who finds out that he's set to be, as the title says, fixed, and he goes off with his friends for one last night on the town with his balls. First, the positives. This is a Tartakovsky movie, and the animation and cartoon shenanigans are on that level, which is to say a very high level. And it definitely has its charming moments. It has the camaraderie and the heart of a Judd Apatow movie, including a pretty sweet love story. But it also amps up the sex jokes to even higher than that standard, to the point where it just feels like it's trying harder to be gross than to be funny. This is a very juvenile movie. I mean, there are at least 2 scenes where the main dog gets raped for laughs.
Bull? Honey, this is not that.
What do you call it?
I don't know what to call it, but it isn't sex.
Okay, if you've never heard of this movie, but the idea of talking dogs, saying and doing R-rated stuff still sounds familiar, that's probably because you're thinking of the live-action movie Strays from just a couple years before. And as one of the few people on Earth who really liked that movie, I couldn't get into this. That movie was kind of the same thing, juvenile humor but with good heart and characters. In fact, I think the humor in that one was even more juvenile, with the exception of,
I don't know what to call it, but it isn't sex.
But I think I connected more to the heart in Strays than in Fixed. Maybe the plot of the dog standing up to his abuser connected with me more. Maybe his naivete was more endearing. But it was enough to overcome its flaws for me. I'm not talking bad about the heart and characters are fixed. In any other movie they would be great, but here they aren't good enough to avoid being drowned out by the gratuitous shots of dog balls. For a long while in the third act it focuses on the love story and even on some less juvenile humor that hits harder than the raunchier stuff. But then, just as I was starting to think that this was going to redeem itself, the dog gets raped for a second time. What's worse is that they still try to wrap up the romance subplot in a heartfelt way while in the middle of this, the most juvenile and mean-spirited joke in the entire movie, and that's counting the first time too. This is the most likable movie on this list, at least that I've seen and know of, as in the movie that I most want to like. Even without all the trouble of getting released, it's still a feature-length 2D animated film aimed at adults, which is why it sucks that it isn't very good. And as much as it pains me to admit, though I hate how it was treated, if it actually did reach theaters it would probably bomb hard. Strays bombed, now imagine that as an animated film that isn't computer generated and can't be viewed by kids. It definitely has its moments, and it is at least better than Sausage Party, the poster child for bad R-rated animated movies, but overall it just kinda blows. At the time I'm revisiting this movie, Primal is airing its third season on Adult Swim, so it's weird to be doing this while a much better R-rated Tartakovsky animation is ongoing. Well, he got his passion project. I'm sure he's proud of it. At least the people who love this movie probably aren't the type to send death threats. Who cares whether it's good? The fact that it was released at all is cause for celebration. Okay, so number 8 isn't available to me without paying extra, so we're going on to number 7, My Oxford Year. We just saw what Netflix is willing to pick up. Let's see something that they actually made. Okay, that's already a bad sign. My Oxford Year was directed by Ian Morris, co-creator of The Inbetweeners, and written by Alison Burnett and Melissa Osborne, based on a novel by Julia Whelan. We are far from fixed here, and for that matter, The Inbetweeners. Seriously, that connection is pretty surprising. In fact, we're in PG-13 territory now. It's about a young American woman who's studying abroad for a year at none other than Oxford University, as the title says. One of her professors is a hot guy who she hates at first, but that quickly turns into an affair, and that's the entire focus of the movie. And nobody seems to notice or care about the legal and moral ramifications of that. Not only is the man literally a professor, but the first time the girl sees him, he's at a restaurant with a woman and then needs to hide from yet another woman that it's implied that he's dating too. Because no cornball romance movie would be complete if the man wasn't someone the girl should stay far away from. All that aside, this is a standard, probably not a Hallmark movie. Oxford is pretty far from small town America, maybe Lifetime? I don't know much about whether or not they release movies like this. I'm pretty sure now they just do movies about true crime or something. See, today's women don't want to waste time on fantasies about love. They want a strong, handsome man to sweep them off their feet and cut them into pieces and dump them in the river. Although this one actually does seem to have a little more production value than those types of movies. I mean, they were able to film at the beautiful setting of Oxford, but the writing is pretty much on the same level. Every romance movie cliche is here, complete with bad dialogue and corny directing. Near the end, there's a PG-13 sex scene set to a dramatic pop song that makes the whole thing cheesy, and then before the song ends, it's the next morning and we get an emotional scene set to the same song that makes the whole thing still cheesy. This is a comedy drama, emphasis on the drama over the comedy. When the jokes do come, they fall flat. There's one emotional sequence that ends with the professor telling his class some quote about dying, doing what you love, or something like that. And then immediately after, the girl's cliche, gay, comic relief best friend breaks in with a really long, awkward speech about where he wants to be when he dies. And he's supposed to be funny or something because he's been blabbering on for so long about nothing, but really it's just annoying and you just want him to shut the hell up because this should be a dramatic scene. One thing I'll give it credit for is that it actually does feel like it captures her experience of studying abroad. This is indeed her Oxford year. She did some fun things, she met some new people, and this version of Oxford feels like a real place. I mean, obviously it is a real place, but everything she experienced feels real too by the time we see her ready to leave. Although, at almost 2 hours, it runs a little too long for a movie like this, so it does drag a little. But then again, that may or may not have helped to flesh out the world around her, like I said. But really, this kind of thing isn't enough to recommend, unless of course you're into this kind of corny romance. It's a melodramatic cliche movie about a love story that's morally questionable and nobody seems to acknowledge it. Strictly a guilty pleasure movie.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now.
George A. Romero's land of the dead.
Zombies, man. They creep me out.
And now, on with the show.
Number 7 is Marked Man Rule Plus Shaw, streaming on Hulu. The first movie, not counting the one that I skipped, that I've just straight up never heard of before. Although with this poster it's clear what we're getting into. Another 50 Shades of Grey or 365 Days situation. Hopefully it's not the latter at least. Well, good news, it's neither. Not in the sense that it's good, just in the sense that there aren't many sex scenes to distract you from how bad it is. Actually, no, that isn't good news. It's from director Nick Cassavetes, who made The Notebook, which surprised me when I first saw it. I admit I haven't seen that one, but judging by its reputation, it seems like this one is just kind of beneath him. Written by Sharon Saboyle, based on the first novel in Jay Crownover's Marked Man series, which is simply called Rule. And this is a bit like My Oxford Year, having a lot of the same flaws, except more so. Yes, I walked in expecting a sex film, but found out by some glimpses at IMDB during the ad breaks that no, it's just a regular romantic drama. No comedy this time. And despite the suggestive poster, the first thing that it mentions under its R rating is pervasive language. Not to say that there's no sex scenes, but they're tamer than you'd expect. The rating also says that it has some nudity, but I think that's just because we see the man's ass a couple times in a way that could probably make it into a PG-13 rating. But the language is still somehow the main thing, and that's saying a lot considering, really, who considers language in movies to be more inappropriate than sex? In fact, there's so much language, I was kind of thinking it'd be like a Sean Baker film at the beginning, or at least the Sean Baker version of a sex film that never comes, not just because of the language, but because of the setting of the male lead's life. That guy, named Rule, of course, is a tattoo artist, and the opening scene is him talking about tattoos in a dive bar while edgy guitar music plays. Before the first commercial break, he's sitting with his family, and his mother's on so many drugs that she falls out of her chair, causing another member of the family to just curse everybody out. He lives a seedy life, but that's really just there to show him as a bad boy with personal demons who can be fixed by the real lead of this movie, the girl named, you guessed it, Shaw. She's a good girl, but has been attracted to Rule since childhood and is now ready to have an affair. But don't worry, this isn't a sex film, so there's an actual story this time. And as I saw more of this relationship, the illusion that this movie was ever intended to be seedy and trashy in the way I initially thought fades away pretty quickly. I only thought that because I knew nothing about the movie. As the film goes on, we see less of Rule's bad boy side and more of him as a broken man who needs a girl to save him. It's a fantasy for women to envision themselves in, helped by the fact that this has a much happier ending than My Oxford Year, and a less sleazy relationship. He's no angel.
Sorry,
oh
am
my
I
God.
interrupting something?
I thought you were single, you dick.
Who's just a friend?
You're not wrong. He so is a dick.
But his flaws aren't glossed over, and they can be mostly explained by saying that he just needed to find real love and settle down. And it's also a more reasonable runtime than My Oxford Year at only 93 minutes. So the fact that it's still not as good means that they must have messed up big time. The obvious nitpick is that it doesn't take place somewhere nearly as beautiful or interesting as Oxford, but even without that, it just feels a lot cheaper. I know that one was funded by Netflix and this one was so independent that it didn't even get enough attention to get a Rotten Tomatoes score, but this one actually does straight up feel like a made-for-TV movie. The melodrama is even more cheesy here, and the R rating means they can put in more corny 50 Shades styled sex montages set to dramatic pop music. The only difference is how toned down they are. But don't worry, the non-sex scenes are ruined by corny needle drops too. There's a scene near the end where a bad guy character gets beaten up and there's some gangster rap music playing over it that feels particularly trying too hard. Switchblade on him, hit the guts like a pump. But the writing and dialogue make it corny on its own. There's a scene 2/3 of the way through where the couple gets into a fight that threatens their entire relationship. The only issue is it's so tiny and understandable that nobody would ever think it was worth breaking up over. I guess if nobody apologized it would be a different story, but this is just such an overreaction. This is through and through a Lifetime movie that somehow managed to get the director of The Notebook involved. I kinda debated with myself whether or not this was the worst one I've seen from last year. I haven't seen War of the Worlds, so there. The only truly awful movie I've seen from that year was Hurry Up Tomorrow. And for a brief moment I put Marked Men below that because at least Hurry Up Tomorrow was more stylish, but then I remembered that the acting was better here. It's still not great, but when the competition is...
And I just want to help you, Abel, but you're not...
Shut the fuck up! Shut the fuck up! Shut up! What are you doing?
Then this movie wins by default. That puts them as even, which means the tiebreaker is the most important detail. At least this movie didn't bore me the way that Hurry Up Tomorrow did. This is the better movie. But that's faint praise. This is even more strictly a guilty pleasure movie. It's basically what you'd expect from a movie based on a book with this cover, but probably less than what you'd expect from this director. Another trashy romance movie about a hot bad boy with issues. In that's all you want in a movie, go for it. I gotta be a little nice here since I know this level of romance movie isn't my genre. Otherwise, watch something else. Well, it seems movies are getting worse as we go on. Until thankfully, number 5 is here to redeem things. Good, Bad, Ugly, streaming on Netflix. Another one I've never heard of before. Turns out it's an action movie from India. I'm not as well versed in Indian cinema as I'd like, considering how much I really enjoy their style of action movies, and judging by some of the reviews, I might have enjoyed it less if I knew more. From writer and director Adhik Ravi Chandran, it is the 63rd movie to star Ajit Kumar. It's so much of a star vessel for him that the original working title for this was AK-63. Even in its current form, his character was only referred to as AK. It's never explained what that stands for, but whatever it is, the audience knows what it really means. Anyway, AK, the character, not the actor, was a king of the criminal underworld until 18 years ago with the birth of his son. As soon as he became a father, he began to rethink his life and realized that the kid deserves better. So he decides to leave that life behind and turn himself in to repay his debt to society. He actually makes a blood oath to that kid to do that and then go see him as soon as he gets out. Like he's actually dripping blood onto the newborn baby. Dude, that's gonna mess him up for life. Or maybe not, because now that kid is a well-adjusted 18-year-old living with his mother in the Indian Embassy of Spain. And now his estranged father is out of jail and is ready to explain his sacrifice. But hold on a second. That kid is then framed for drug possession and later murder as part of a plan from a rival gang to get back at AK. So now, Daddy's gotta get back to his old violent ways. The movie throws everything at the wall to see what sticks. Here's how it opens. We get a few scenes explaining how he turned himself in. Then there's a massive prison riot. Then everything stops when AK appears on the scene. Reformed and working with the prison guards, he stands before them all alone and gets a lot of them to run back to their cells just by telling the crowd that he'll kick their asses. But there's still an entire mob of people stupid enough to stay. And he disposes of them all by himself in a fight sequence that would make John Wick look like a pussy. And then when it's all over, he leads a full-blown musical number with an equally huge mob of prisoners in the middle of the jail, which is now full of lights to make it feel more like a nightclub or something. And this all happens before the opening credits finish. If you're familiar with Indian action movies, you may know this kind of thing. Wildly over-the-top action scenes with a seemingly invincible hero, sometimes set to a song about how great that hero is. At one point we get a song that straight up includes a line that apparently translates to something like, "Theater goers will go crazy for AK." Yeah, that's what was missing from Wicked, a pitch to studio executives. And the most over-the-top aspects are not even played for laughs. You believe this guy can do the impossible things he does. The man's a living legend. Bask in his aura. That seems to be a standard for Indian cinema. Really, it's an underrated market. But this one amps up even that. The story is very fast-paced and so much of the footage, especially in the action scenes, are either sped up or in stylized slow motion. This movie wants you to feel the action. And it's not difficult to tell why Ajit Kumar got so popular, because he plays the hell out of this larger-than-life action hero role. Whether he's killing bad guys or even simply aura farming, you never stop believing that he's cool. And he even nails the odd scene where he needs to slow down and care for his family. And he looks like a movie star. His hair may be going gray, but he manages to make even that look good. And for a long time, I was loving this movie. The constant simulation was exciting. And the music's also pretty fun. A major issue I hear from people is that the plot is non-existent, but I didn't really think it was particularly bad. I mean, it's not particularly deep, but I've seen plenty of good action movies that have this same level of simplicity. In fact, I've seen plenty with even less story. This movie takes that simple plot and beats you into submission with everything that's going on. The only issue is that it eventually gets old. Like, actually exhausting. It beat me into submission, and then it just kinda kept on beating me. This movie is 2 hours and 19 minutes, which in my experience is short by Indian standards, but it's too long for something of this intense wavelength. Or maybe it should have been longer to give me more time to breathe between all the hype moments, or to play some of the action scenes at regular speed instead of fast forward. It was around the last half hour or so when the fatigue kicked in and I started to notice more of the flaws, mostly in the action scenes. Once again, they are fast-paced and heavily stylized, but at that point I realized I'd be enjoying them more, once again, if they were played at a more normal speed. I love the occasional slow motion shots or speeding things up to make it even more intense, but this movie overuses both of them, at least in that stretch of the movie. Probably also before too, but I just didn't notice then. One of the worst offenders is a car chase scene. It doubles as a musical number as the song that plays during the chase is being sung by some random guy in the back of one of the vans. The scene alternates between shots of him singing and dancing and brief sped up shots of the chase. It feels exactly like a music video. But as an action scene, I can barely tell what was going on half the time. I'm literally watching a car chase through short snippets and fast forward. Cars explode and most of the time I don't even know why. But it's really the climax where I was most thinking, this would be really cool if it was playing at a normal speed. I'm not going to go in deep with that one, maybe it's just the fact that I wasn't cutting between the action and the singer, so I was more willing to view it as a real action sequence and not just a music video. Also, that scene goes by so quickly that it actually took a long time afterwards for it to sink in for me that, oh yeah, things are resolved now. Most of the other action sequences legitimately feel more climactic than the actual climax here. Even without the fatigue, this movie's action peaked before AK even gets to Spain, and not even just with the prison fight. Another thing I noticed after the fatigue set in was the lesser quality of some of the special effects. There are some CGI gun muzzle flashes that look really fake, and there's an animated flashback about AK's backstory that looks like a cutscene from a PS2 game. Speaking of that flashback, it wasn't until after I watched that I found out that it actually tries to link him to the events of the John Wick movies, implying that he was there fighting alongside the titular character. Something I missed, possibly because they just called him John or something like that, and because I definitely wasn't expecting him to be connected in any way. Oh, but that's not all. I missed these next ones because I haven't seen any of these properties yet, but it also says that he helped plan Money Heist, worked with a South Korean gangster named Dong Lee, who's apparently a big star in Korea, and had a powerful run in Malaysia, which is apparently a reference to a movie called Billa, starring AK himself, Ajith Kumar. Which brings me to why I said at the start of this review I may have enjoyed it less if I was more familiar with Indian cinema. Apparently there are a lot of references to his older work, most of which went over my head, but the main criticism about this movie is that it allegedly cares more about reminding people of these movies than telling an actual story. I've seen the term brain rot used in a few Letterboxd reviews to describe this kind of thing.
Johnny, Johnny, yes, Papa. Telling lies, no, Papa. Telling lies, no, Papa.
They're probably misusing that word. But if the fan service is that bad, I can see why it might get annoying.
I'll be back. You've been back enough. I'll be back.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Once again, this starts out as an amazing time and stays that way for most of it before the fatigue sets in. By the time the very end comes and AK comes in with a shotgun to deliver one final cathartic moment, I just didn't care anymore. But it is still worth a watch for the pure epicness of it all, even if the chills die down eventually. An epic tribute to its own star, and one that has the gall to be an unofficial spin-off of like 50 other things. As an ignorant American who can't notice the main reasons people hate it, this is awesome for quite some time. Skipping over the next two takes us all the way to number 2, the big one, a Minecraft movie. I already talked about it in another video. The link to that is probably also in the description. Really, Jay? That's what you consider a 3-star movie? Okay, to summarize, a lot of it is fun, but also a lot of it is cringe. As I said in that video, I alternated between this movie's good and this movie sucks for most of it, before settling firmly into this is good territory during the climax. Jason Momoa and Jack Black elevate. A lot of the humor, especially before they get to Minecraft, makes sense when you find out that it's from the director of Napoleon Dynamite. It isn't perfect, but it's way better than a movie with this much production trouble has any right to be, and this is coming from somebody who isn't even that into the game. Although Good, Bad, Ugly remains my favorite on this list. Both had moments where I just wasn't getting into it, but I was into Good, Bad, Ugly for a lot more of the runtime than Minecraft. And unsurprisingly, its high points are a lot higher than the Minecraft movie. It's not surprising Minecraft got this far on the list. Judging by the public reaction, it couldn't be anything other than a movie with a lot of 5-star and half-star reviews. It's the chicken jockey crowd versus the people who are too mature for this kind of thing. But it was somehow held off from the top spot. And what is this movie that could have accomplished such an impossible feat? Why, it's Zombies 4 Dawn of the Vampires, or Z-O-M-whatever. Everywhere else lists this as just Zombies, it's called Zombies. Anyway, sounds like a fun horror movie. Oh wait, I said at the beginning that it was a Disney Channel movie. It was directed by Paul Hohen, who has a long history of directing Disney Channel movies and children's sitcoms dating back to the 90s, and that history includes all of the previous Zombies movies. Written by David Light and Joseph Razzo, who also wrote all those movies. They were helped with the teleplay by Josh A. Kagan, who wrote for the live-action Disney Channel Kim Possible movie. Whatever you say about the franchise, at least give it credit for being able to keep the same creative team throughout. I have not seen any other movie in this franchise. I was aware of it, but I knew very little about it other than that it was the new popular thing on Disney Channel, and that it's about zombies in high school. I didn't even know it was a musical until the first time they burst into song. And yes, that does indeed mean that I went right into this without watching the first 3. I've seen enough stuff for this video. I didn't rewatch 2 movies before actually trying to give them a fair review, so why would I watch 3 that I probably wouldn't even talk about just to catch up on the deep lore of this Disney Channel musical? Well, it opens with an animated sequence, and I say animated in a very loose sense, to explain some things about this world. It's a town where some meteor landed and turned half the inhabitants into different monsters, but it looks like mostly zombies. The zombies are told apart because the infection gave them all green hair for some reason, and they all wear some sort of high-tech bracelet that looks like it keeps them all from going feral. Don't ask me if the zombies in this high school will grow up or not since they're all dead. As much as I just ridiculed the idea that there's lore for me to catch up on, that probably is explained in the other movies. The point is that they all live together with humans and other monsters. But it turns out that the meteor also created two, I guess, pockets of reality in two different parts of the woods nearby. One is in constant night and is inhabited by vampires. The other is probably in constant daylight and is inhabited by daywalkers. What are daywalkers, you might ask? Well, they're like vampires, except they live in daylight. Also, the vampires are able to live in daylight too, but just choose not to. But they're still different species, apparently. And they hate each other. On to our main people. As they're described in one line at some point that I'll mention later, they're two zombies, a werewolf, and a girl who's half alien. School's out and they have their High School Musical to What Time Is It number before going into the woods to carpool to their separate summer plans. But then they get into a car crash that's just over the top enough to look awkward on such a low budget. And they stumble right into the conflict between vampires and daywalkers. You see, to avoid having to drink blood, both species need to feed on a special fruit to live. But the blood fruit is in short supply, except in one orchard. And by the time the main characters arrive, these guys find out that the gate is locked with some sort of elaborate process to open it that these two groups are going to have to work together to complete. And the kids persuade them to let them tag along because, in their own words,
Because we're two zombies, a werewolf, and an alien. We're living proof that all monsters can work together.
And thus world peace was achieved. Also, there's a Romeo and Juliet situation going on between a teenage daywalker and vampire, and they help to save everything. Oh, and did I mention that the labyrinth to open the doors in the ruins of an old camp where these two species used to coexist? This is a typical Disney Channel movie. Squeaky clean and wholesome, but also corny. The messages about tolerance and putting aside your differences are far from subtle, but in a world where kids have unlimited internet access, maybe they need this. I'm guessing the first three might have leaned a little more into racism allegory given the more realistic high school setting. Really only slightly more though. Yeah, this one actually is a straight-to-TV movie. But the songs are catchy. I could totally see this series as this generation's High School Musical, albeit a less mainstream one. The musical numbers are fun enough. The biggest issue I had was in one sequence where it's a love song between the daywalker and vampire, where a lot of the choreography is just them flying very short distances together before landing and then flying again. It's really corny and just not as charming as it would have been if they had just performed it with normal choreography, but all the other ones are nice. And the whole thing has a cheesy, wholesome charm to it. I admit I haven't seen a Disney Channel movie since I was a kid, but I'm still going out on a limb and saying that there are probably a lot worse out there. It is, at the very least, watchable. The blurb that's cited in Letterboxd year in review says that this series should have ended earlier. What's worse is that I'm pretty sure it ended on a cliffhanger to yet another movie. Well, I am yet again too ignorant to see how cynical it actually is, this time willingly so. And so, in my eyes, that wholesomeness made it feel like it lacked the cynicism of some of Disney's other recent stuff. But there's also one point about 2/3 of the way through that I felt like I need to talk about. The final step to getting the door open. It happened so quickly and anticlimactically that I legit needed to go back to make sure I didn't miss something. 1 second we cut back to this puzzle thing, and suddenly somebody just notices something in plain sight that saves the day. No build up. One of the biggest plot points in the entire movie happens in an instant. The whiplash was so bad I went back, like I said. Sure enough, the last scene had nothing to do with it. What's worse is that there was a commercial break between those scenes when I watched it on Disney+, and when I reached that point again, they gave me yet another series of ads. So I sat through double the commercials all for nothing, and I will never forgive those lazy screenwriters for that. And Disney Plus for not getting that I already watched the fucking ad break. But mostly the screenwriters. But whatever. Did I like the movie? I don't know. I'm uninformed. I never saw the other three, so I probably shouldn't pass judgment unless I saw at least one of them. Yeah, I kept you waiting for me to take a side on the #1 most divisive movie of the year, only to refuse to do that. I also couldn't take a side on the #1 last time because I didn't even see it. Both because it wasn't streaming anywhere and because I really did not want to. Oh dear, I'd love to see that, but it's not streaming on anything that I have, so... Did this movie make me want to watch the predecessors? Maybe just to see where it came from? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You watch Zombies 4 to see if you'd be interested in the original, only to decide that you should probably see the original just because you saw Zombies 4. But Zombies 4 was amusing enough given what it is. So, was this selection better or worse than last time? I'm actually not sure. Most of the ratings for both of them lean more negative. The worst one here wasn't as bad as the worst one from that other video, but the best one here was also not nearly as good as the best one then. For a time I was thinking the other one was more entertaining for me since it was all horror with one comedy in there, and those are my two favorite genres. But also everything this time entertained me more than Skinamarink and Que Viva Mexico, and that's almost half the entire selection of that. let's just call it even. Support my Patreon if you want to see more of this kind of thing. Link in the description.